Here's a bit of an oddity. This is a prototype for a guitar called the Robert Johnson. Sounds like a duty-free brand of scotch, but no, it's a guitar. This is not a Gibson, though Gibson did make a Robert Johnson commemorative L1 guitar from 2003 to 2016. This was produced through a partnership between Valley Arts Guitar Company and Samick in, I believe, 1995. Robert Johnson really became the popular face of the Delta Blues in the early 90s with the Complete Recordings box set. It got a lot of press. All the guitar magazines ran articles. There were books of tabs and scores being produced. Not to say he wasn't recognized before then. He certainly was. But this was an important collection. It really kind of raised his esteem in the general population. Valley Arts. Who are they? It's a North Hollywood guitar shop on Ventura Boulevard that began in the 70s, run by Mike McGuire and Al Carness, with help from a bunch of people who would go on to do big things in the guitar industry. They were good with repairs, and some serious names would bring stuff to get fixed. Larry Carlton, half the Wrecking Crew, Tommy Tedesco, etc. So they went on. They were building Super Strats and other custom electrics throughout the 80s. Unfortunately, in 1990, their storefront burned down, and they decided to sell half of the business to Samick, which is a large Korean manufacturer. Shortly thereafter, well, things didn't really go so great with Samick. They weren't happy. They decided to take positions with Gibson and sold the whole thing to Samick, who owned it for a few years before Gibson bought the name from them, because in the interim, Mike McGuire had become operations manager at the Gibson Custom Shop. They set up another little Valley Arts music store repair place in downtown Nashville, which was run by Al. This stuff always gets so convoluted. Anyway, the store closed in 2005. No more Valley Arts. So this guitar comes from that period in the 90s where Samick and Valley Arts had both of their names on product, and this apparently says it was made in the USA rather than Korea. I don't know if that's true or not. The thing that really perks up my attention is that it's prototype number 6, made specially for Jeff Healey. Jeff was a Toronto guy. He was blind since childhood. They removed both of his eyes because of blastoma in his retinas, I think. He played with the guitar in his lap. For a time, he had a heck of a mullet. He was in Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. And I first saw him on a public television children's show in the 80s called Cucumber, which was a great show, filmed, I think, in the 70s, but it was on for a very long time. The word is an acronym for Children's Underground Club of United Moose and Beaver for Enthusiastic Reporters. Moose was this kind of Bullwinkle ripoff, and Beaver, Beaver had a whole lot of boys questioning things, because though ostensibly a male character, he was obviously voiced and acted in costume by a young woman, and she had a cute voice, so a lot of boys had a crush on Beaver. Add to this, they had a bunch of great appearances by whoever was in the Toronto cast of Second City at the time. They'd show up and make $100 for being on this kid show and improv for 10 minutes. So like Martin Short, John Candy, Catherine O'Hara, maybe Dan Aykroyd. There were others, but I think it's all basically lost media at this point. There were very few scraps remaining. Here's a little taste.
Wait! Is it me?
It's Weatherman. Mind if I stand till it stops raining?
Oh, boy, am I glad to see you. Hey, listen, do you know anything about the weather?
Well, my name isn't Tomato Man, it's Weatherman. Of course I know about weather.
Oh, good. Look, maybe you can help my friend over there.
Anyway, Jeff Healey was on there as a boy in a segment clicking away at his Braille typewriter and strumming Hank Williams' Kalijah. It left an impression on me. A few years later, he showed up on Much Music, and I'm like, hey, I know that guy. Anyway, he went on to have a few gold records in the early 90s, and he passed away very young in his 40s from cancer. So this guitar was apparently made for Jeff. It's inspired, kind of, by the L1 that Robert Johnson was photographed with in that most famous of the few authenticated photos that exist. Incidentally, the guitar in that famous photo looks really beat up for something that's only 9 years old. You wonder if someone relicked it. This one is obviously modeled after the first or second year of the L1 flat top variation, which started in 1926. Prior to that, the L1 was a small-bodied arch top with a round hole. We've worked on some of those in various previous videos. I can tell it's 26 or 27 because it has the pyramid-ended bridge, which is uncommon for Gibsons. It might be the only time they used one. In 1928, it was changed to an odd, sort of flat but deep-bellied shape, and in the 30s they went to the simple Gibson rectangle, which is very familiar. This guitar is in pretty much like new condition. It's in really clean shape, practically unplayed. The only issue is the bridge is starting to come up, most dramatically on the ends. And we don't want that to come ripping off at any point, so I guess we are going to re-glue it. This is a 12 fret model. The one Robert Johnson was playing in that picture is a 13 fret, by the way. So not quite accurate there, guys. 4 1/2 64ths on the bass side. 3 1/2 on the treble. Maybe even less. That's more like 3. That's pretty low. And it's got a very tall saddle. Relief is about 11 thousandths, which might be a bit on the high side. I don't know how straight we want to make this neck. So once again, we've got saddle exposure of a full 1/4 inch on the D string. It's too tall, gentlemen. Gibson was not shipping guitars with saddles that tall in 1927. Yes, I believe this tall saddle could be a contributing factor to the juvenile delinquency of today. Just a lot of torque. Pulling and pulling. The finish on this guitar is extraordinary. It's soothing, black, and warm. It's lacquer which is sinking in like an old Gibson. And it's a strange, almost greenish gray. It's not, the camera probably makes it look more orange than it is. It's actually very muted in person. Having established that the bridge is in the right location and it intonates okay, I'll proceed to score around it before taking it off the guitar. I use a fresh blade for this and I do not go too deep. I don't want to sever wood fibers. On the back of the bridge here, with all that tension, it can cleave the wood off like splitting cedar shingles. I'll pop on my bridge heater. This is a silicone heat mat which was marketed for warming the engine block on snowmobiles. This is controlled with a rheostat so it doesn't get too hot. I shoot for about 220 degrees Fahrenheit. I usually leave this on for about 15 minutes before attempting to, put a palette knife under it. But I check it frequently. I can tell that this is epoxy. It takes more pressure and wrangling to get it to come free. I protect the top using this piece of plastic so that my knife doesn't leave big swirl marks in the lacquer. And I'm sort of conversant with the grain direction or run out. I can feel it's just about free, so I'll remove my clamp. I want to be careful separating the last couple of fibers which are holding it on, because if you're not careful you could push the knife through too abruptly as the resistance is released and do damage that you don't want to do. You can see the outline of the epoxy. It's just a big puddle, and that's necessary, as so often happens. They didn't remove finish all the way to the edges of the bridge. Frankly, I think that's irresponsible. Manufacturing expediency is one thing, but this is really building in a problem into the guitar. The inside is a fairly typical X-brace. Doesn't have the character of a 1920s Gibson flat top. You can see there's some damage to the bridge plate, which happens if you don't put a block in there when you're drilling the pinholes. The bit can ram through when resistance lets go, making a whole bunch of splinters. Now I have to scrape or cut the lacquer free. This doesn't feel like nitrocellulose. It's quite thin, but it feels more like polyurethane to me. It's a bit more plasticky. Here's a chunk that's suitable for measurement if I can actually pick it up off the surface. And we'll see how thick it is. It's about 6/1000ths of an inch, which isn't too bad as these things go. I've seen much thicker. A little bit of 220 grit sandpaper on a flat block, and I'll try and get rid of any other remnants of glue. Clean it right up. I'll spend some quiet and tender moments with the epoxy on the underside of the bridge. This is a layer at least as thick as the finish on the soundboard, remember, because it was doing double duty as a filler. Epoxy has a place in repair work, undoubtedly. I just don't see, unless you're building a carbon fiber guitar or something similar, why you would want to use it. On a prototype like this, to me, there's very little joy in epoxy. And I'll hit that with the sanding block. I want to make sure the underside of the bridge is flat or maybe just the tiniest bit concave. I don't want it convex so that it would rock on the middle. That would make it very difficult to sand. And of course, I want to get it really clean. No contamination from the previous glue. I have to go back and scrape some more off here. The bridge is being held in a little cradle with cork padding, and it has a 3/16" dowel in the middle that comes up through one of the bridge pin holes. It's helpful on bridges with delicate sides and not a lot of surface area to hold in a vise. The top of this guitar is very flat. Again, not very much like Gibson L series of that era, which have quite a lot of arch in them. I'll take the time to put a strip of self-adhesive sandpaper down and use it to make the bridge conform to the soundboard geometry by sanding to show up the high spots, scraping those away and then sanding some more. The bridge nestles down into its trough very nicely, but I'll also use a couple of 3/16" machine screws with tape around them so they're a very good snug fit in the holes to maintain position. To clamp the pyramid wings, I have some padded blocks with holes drilled in them to keep them centered. Using Titebond on this one. Hide glue is nice, of course. Reglues on modern guitars, though, I like Titebond. It's got a good track record. Saw a guitar recently with a bridge I reglued in 1999. It's been around the world several times in the interim, still holding strong, and I'm confident in its abilities. Clamps. Recently, a gentleman told me that he wanted to reglue his own bridge. He was feeling confident in his abilities, and he wanted to know where to get the clamps. So I sent him a link, and he was like, but they're $35 each. And I said, yeah? Well, why? And I said, because they can be. This is literally the only thing they're good at. It's what they're made for. It's a specialist tool. On a 12-fret guitar, the bridge is far enough away from the sound hole that nothing else will work properly. Stacking heavy books on it isn't going to cut it. And he said, but I could almost take it to a shop and have it done for that. And I said, maybe. It's funny how the world works. I'll squeegee off the glue squeeze out. Clean it up with a little bit of wet paper towel. Just getting ready to polish the frets here. This board, interesting. It's almost like it's been finished. It seems to be real ebony, but I don't know, it's sealed. Maybe they took it to a buffing wheel and really hit it hard with polishing compound and glazed the surface, because it's almost like wax, you know? And you might note that of the two 12th fret markers, you've got one that's entire, and the other one, well, something happened. Maybe it wasn't embedded deep enough and they sanded through, exposing black epoxy and only remnants of the pearl. The cynical part of my brain wonders if they gave this one to Jeff because he might not notice that immediately. Another thing I notice is the two side dot markers at the 12th fret here are basically bisected by the line of the board, and they're visible from the front of the guitar. And this is something I warn people about when they're trying to do aggressive sanding on Gibson boards during a refret, trying to get rid of like deep fingernail divots or whatever, because, well, they have larger size dots to begin with and they're positioned closer to the front of the board, so if you're not careful you'll sand right through them and you end up with a situation like this. In this case, I wonder if this is an attempt to salvage a situation where the neck was overset with too much angle. As it is, we have the exceptionally tall saddle and actually a pretty low bridge height. Sanding the board thinner effectively raises the action a little bit in that case. You're putting more gap between the top of the frets and the underside of the strings. Yeah, this rarely happens in real life, where we end up with the tops of the pyramids being taller than the central part of the bridge. Maybe I should get one of those AI song generators to compose something around the lyric polishing. Too loose. Lautrec also used a paintbrush, I think to myself, as I swipe CA glue on the back of this saddle. This is more about finger strength than it is about the snugness of the saddle. This guitar also has herringbone purfling under the black lacquer. There's going to be a little bit of glue squeeze out around the inside of the pinholes, so I'll just ream those gently. Would you look at that break angle? It holds the same coiled menace as a late Roman or early medieval siege weapon, an onager perhaps. Blink fast when the peg's coming at you. If you didn't want that potential, what would the next step be? Make a new bridge that's a 1/16 of an inch taller. Let's see how it sounds.